Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Jessica Friedman from MedEdits Medical Admissions. It's really nice to see everybody tonight. We are just going to give this a little bit of time just so people can tune in. And
Hi, everybody.
we can, sorry about that. And, that way we can get started. So I'm just gonna, kind of give a little time for people to jump on, and then we will get started with the evening. Okay. I hope everyone is doing well. We are recording this, so if if you want to watch it later, of course, that is certainly an option. So, but I'm just going to wait like another minute just because I know we are expecting a bunch of people. It's a great time of the year for medical school admissions, so there's a lot of exciting stuff going on. So just to introduce myself, I am Dr. Jessica Friedman. I am the founder and president of MedEdits Medical Admissions. You can visit us at www.mededits.com. And I am a physician and a former medical school admissions committee member and residency admissions member at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. And I founded MedEdits, I guess, about 13, 14 years ago now. It's been a wonderful journey. And when I started MedEdits, I really had no idea where it would go. We have, I found an amazing group of faculty who now work with me, and we have worked with hundreds of students, helping them get into medical school and residency and then fellowship, BSMD programs, early assurance programs, BSMD programs. We also have a great team of former admissions officers, and all of my faculty have experience in admissions in whatever field they are advising students. And that certainly is one of the many things that really distinguishes us and allows us to offer you the best guidance. Some updates. We continue to get updates from our students from this past season. Just this week, we heard final decisions from students going to Johns Hopkins, UCLA, Hackensack, Duke, and Stanford. And so, we certainly sometimes results kind of trickle in a little bit later. Students who maybe, were doing very well in the process early on, and then kind of just let us know what their final decisions were once, all of their admissions results were in, and they were, if they were waiting for any wait lists or anything like that. And we are also in the process of working with our students who are applying this season, for entry in 2022. And so that's super exciting. And certainly a lot of our students submitted their MCAS, TMD, SAS, and ACOMAS applications, but many have not yet submitted their applications. And many students that we're working with are just getting started now. So I want to, just kind of jump right off by, initially dispelling some myths that, some people have about, the medical school admissions process. We are hearing a lot of, different, sort of rumors, things that people are reading on forums, things that are making people super nervous, that, for example, if they haven't submitted yet, that it's too late to submit, that they should just, forget about applying to medical school this year. And I really want to, emphasize that is not necessarily the case. If you have taken the MCAT, or if you are planning on taking the MCAT, let's say later this month, it is not too late to be applying to medical school. And we certainly have many people who submit the end of June, even in early July, mid-July, who are successful in the process. So while it is ideal to submit in May, we realize that is not possible for everybody. And, depending on other circumstances regarding your candidacy and what's going on, we do allow, we do work with many successful students who are not one of the first to submit. So that's number one. Number two is something we're hearing a lot about right now is Casper. And students are, again, I think just reading things on Reddit, Student Doctor Network, there certainly are some companies out there that push that you must, pay to prep for Casper. And, we do offer students prep for Casper if they really are super nervous about this, if this is kind of a weak spot of theirs. But situational judgment tests are not meant to be difficult. They are really meant to test, do you make the right moral and ethical decisions? So as long as you don't write anything or say anything, that is offensive to any groups, as long as you sort of are politically correct and do the right thing, you will do perfectly well on Casper. We don't encourage students to stress about this and situational judgment test that's being administered by the AMC. Everyone tends to do very well on these tests. I don't even like calling them tests. So please, whatever, you do, just don't stress about those. So I would like to encourage people to, post your questions in the chat, because this, session is obviously meant for you and it's meant to help you. I am here to address any concerns that you may have. So please don't be shy and, post whatever questions you may have. Also tell your friends if you can about these office hours, just because I do think that it's valuable for both pre-medical students, medical students, even current residents who are looking at fellowships. We really cover the continuum of medical education here at MedEdits. So Daniel asks, if I'm interested in several competitive specialties, how would I decide what type of research to do in M1? Okay, so this is a really good question. And it's a little tricky, right? Because everyone sort of encourages students to come into medical school with an open mind and, not to be focused and not to be specialized. Yet, the most competitive specialties want to see focus and dedication to that specialty. So if you are considering several competitive specialties, so let's say you're considering optho, ENT, and orthopedics, right? 3 very, very competitive specialties that definitely want to see research in their discipline if you're applying to those specialties. What I would advise you to do would be to choose the one that right now is highest on your list and try to get research within that specialty, okay? And maybe even, try to get research in a couple of them at the same time, just because you don't know what exactly is going to pan out, right? So if you are interested in staying at your medical school and doing research, within, let's say, your optho department at your medical school, I would be advising you now, because it's even a little bit late, but, certainly, especially if you're willing to volunteer and your time, I'm sure you can find something valuable. Get in touch with attendings, with, MD, PhDs, whomever is running the labs or the research within that specific department at your medical school, and see if there are any opportunities that are available for this summer. If, let's say you go to medical school and that's not really your home base and you're going home, wherever home is, I would advise you to do the same thing at whatever local medical schools and universities exist in your home state and your home city. Reach out to people, I'm going to be home for the summer, I'm finishing up my M1 year, and I'm interested in doing research in ophthalmology. And you can write directly to attendings, to physicians, to researchers. You can also write to department heads, right? So most departments will have weekly or every other week faculty meetings, right? And so, or they'll just send out a mass email, we have a student who's interested in doing research. Can anyone take a research student? So this is how these kinds of things happen. So that's what I would advise. And then if you end up changing your mind, all the work that you did, it's not lost, right? Because whatever valuable work you did in one specialty, they understand that you're likely to contribute in the same way to a different specialty, okay? So all of those skills and that work ethic, those are all translatable to another specialty in medicine, right? So, but I would, if you're on the fence, and this is something that we always tell our M1s, get exposure to different specialties in medicine. The whole idea of shadowing does not end when you finish being a pre-med. So some people think that I never have to shadow again. And in fact, in some way, I feel that shadowing as a medical student is more important than it is as a pre-med, just because you really, that decision of decide, when you need to make that decision about what specialty you want to pursue comes up super duper quickly. And as a third year medical student, you're only getting exposure to the core specialties. So you want to definitely try to shadow in all of those specialties as a medical student. Okay, someone asked, what is the latest date that you recommend to take the MCAT to apply for this cycle before deciding if we need to wait to apply for next cycle? I have my primary submitted. That's another terrific question, Maddie. I ideally like people to finish up their MCAT testing by the third week of June. So there's a June 18th and a June 19th exam, I believe. That is my ideal. And Maddie, if you're thinking of a later test date than that, just post it in the chat and I'll give you my comments on that. Some of this also obviously depends on what you're anticipating getting on the MCAT. If you're anticipating getting, let's say you're testing at a 524 right now, super duper high, or that's where you would like to get to and you think that's going to happen, then that means maybe you could test a little bit later and still be okay. If you're testing, let's say, more in the 512 to 515 range, and that's what you're anticipating to be your max, then I wouldn't want you to push that test date to July, right? So some of this is somewhat nuanced depending on what you anticipate your performance is going to be. And then again, if you underperform and you don't think you're going to have a competitive score, then you can always, abort this application cycle and apply next cycle. And we always work with students who get back MCAT scores that are somewhat disappointing. And then, we kind of decide together, you'll be a stronger applicant next year. And so why don't we just wait? And that sort of is the beauty of applying to medical school, is you have that choice. So that's actually a really great option as a medical school want-to-be student. Okay, I want to know whether I should take the MCAT in the spring of 2022, March. However, I am barely going to be taking OChem in the fall and planned on studying for the MCAT from late December to early March. Okay, ideally, we like students to have completed all of their prerequisites, including biochemistry, before taking the MCAT. That said, some students do take the MCAT before finishing all their prerequisites. This really depends on you. It also depends on how focused your undergraduate curriculum is towards the MCAT. So, some students are very good at self-studying, right? And they're very good at learning subjects on their own. So I think you also have to kind of understand, what kind of learner are you? Are you a really good independent learner? Are you going to have a significant amount of time? I mean, certainly that's the right amount of months to spend from December to early March. But, ideally we want everyone to have covered all the content that is on the MCAT before they sit down to study. And then you're just doing content review once you're studying. That would sort of be my ideal. So unless I'm misunderstanding you, I ideally wouldn't want you taking the MCAT before you've actually finished OChem, ideally. So if I have misunderstood you, again, type in the chat, and I will give you another answer depending on that. Okay, my GPA is 3.5 cumulative with a 3.7 science GPA. That's interesting, because usually we don't see that much of a spread between the cumulative and the science, which makes me wonder if you have taken very few science classes and did really well in those, and the majority of your courses are non-science and you didn't do as well. The BCPM GPA is the most important. That's the most important GPA when applying to medical school. So, yes, your cumulative is a little bit lower. We like to hit that 3.5, just because there are some schools that are going to screen you out if you don't hit the 3.5. But every school sort of uses their own formula and their own cutoffs. We don't know what those are. Every school is different and they change from year to year. So the 3.7 science GPA is what's going to be most important. And we would want your MCAT to, quote, match that 3.7 science GPA. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, let me continue here. This will be my third cycle applying to USMD schools as a Canadian. I have written the MCAT 3 times already, 516 and 3.87. Would you suggest I rewrite? No. Once you have taken the MCAT 3 times, because medical schools see all of your scores, after that third attempt, it just doesn't present well to admissions officers, right? Unlike college admissions where you have the opportunity to super score, an SAT or an ACT, you don't really have that option for medical school. So even if a medical school says, we consider your highest scores, they're still seeing all of your scores. And that's just how it's reported to medical schools. So a 516 is a really, is a completely solid and strong score. And the 3.87 is also a really strong GPA. So if this is your third time applying, we would want to know, well, what are your experiences? Was there an issue with your school list? Obviously, there are not as many medical schools that are going to be international student friendly and Canadian friendly. So you want to choose your school list very carefully. And we would also want to look at your experiences. Was there something lacking in your experiences, or was there something in the way that you presented yourself that you sort of didn't give yourself enough credit for all of your experiences? So we would want to review that past application and get a sense of, well, what could we improve upon? Because honestly, the metrics are where they need to be. And the fact that you have a 124 in cars, are there some schools that are going to, kind of filter you out because of that? Yes, but there are enough that won't. And your higher, you want your higher scores to be in your sciences anyway. So if there's one place where medical schools are willing to be a little bit more forgiving, it's with cars. So that's something else to think about too. How long does the MCAS verification process take? Some people who submitted after me have been verified already. I'm getting concerned. Mary, it's so early. No need to be concerned. Our students who have submitted, as far as I know, nobody has gotten verified yet. And our people are pretty on top of things. So I would not worry about this. You want to make sure that all of your transcripts have been received. And AMCAS is actually really good at answering questions. So if you are concerned, you should call them, but it's way, way, way too early to be concerned. And Mary, if you just want to type in what your submission date was, I'm happy to look at that as well and, offer some clarification, but it's too early to be worried about that. Okay, so if you plan on taking a prep course for the MCAT, we still ideally would like you to have learned the material before taking the prep course. So the prep course really should be review of material that you have already learned. So I would be concerned about this. But again, if you're a really great learner, a fast learner, you're good at teaching yourself, you're good at, learning something sort of on the fly, so to speak, then maybe that's something you can pull off. It really depends on what kind of student you are. Most people can't really perform that well by just taking a prep course and learning material that is not sort of anything that they've seen in the past. Most people do better when they're kind of relearning material or they're refreshing on material. So I would want to know, maybe why you need to take the MCAT so early. If you're taking organic in the fall, maybe maybe you should be taking the test a year from the fall. So rather than taking it, let's say in the spring of 2022, maybe you should be taking the exam in the fall of 2022. Okay, so Mary, you submitted on the 27th. So assuming your transcripts are in, then I would just wait. I would just give it a little bit more time, and I'm sure you're going to be verified. But again, if you have concerns, you certainly can call AMCAS and just make sure that there's nothing that is kind of holding up your application review. So I think that would be a wise thing to do. So if you guys have any other questions, you can go ahead and post those. Otherwise, I'm happy to, kind of discuss with you some of the things that are now coming up with our students. So certainly those students who have already submitted, they are gearing up to start working on secondary essays. And how are they doing that? They are going to our website, they're looking at last year's secondary essay prompts, and they are starting on secondaries, pre-writing those secondaries in anticipation that schools won't be checking their secondary essay prompts. Now, every year there are going to be some medical schools that will change their prompts. So just sort of be forewarned that it's possible that if you pre-write your secondary essays, that you might have to start over with some of them. But definitely as soon as you submit your application, whether you're submitting it tomorrow or whether you're submitting it in 3 weeks, you definitely want to start pre-writing those secondary essays as soon as you submit your primary. Now, the benefit, frankly, of submitting late or later, I use that word very lightly, like let's say you submit, on July 1st, that's when this year's secondary prompts are going to start coming out. So at that point, you can actually start working on secondary essays based on this year's prompts and not even recycled prompts. So, and that's again how you really gain some momentum and pick up some speed by working on those secondary essays as soon as you submitted your primary. So Vichy asks, what exactly is covered in the diagnostic session with MedEdits? We don't like really discussing our services on YouTube just because there's so many questions that we like to go through, to really help students in their process. But Vichy, I encourage you to sign up for a free 15-minute consultation, and you can do that via our website, and we will also post that link. And that way you can really learn about our services. But, in that initial diagnostic session, we meet you where you are. So, if you are applying this year, we are going to guide you towards, okay, what do you need to do this year, to become an even more competitive applicant while you're applying? What should you be covering in your documents? If you are a reapplicant, we look at last year's application and we make an assessment about that. And then, of course, if you are a year or more away from applying, we discuss with you all the aspects of your background and your candidacy and what you need to be doing to make sure you're a competitive applicant and to make sure that you're actually ready to apply when you would like to apply. So sometimes students, they would like to apply, let's say next year, but we sometimes feel like, look, we can help you with that, but we think you're going to be a stronger applicant if you wait. And we'll always be honest with students about that. We're never going to encourage you to apply if we feel that it's not going to allow you to be the strongest possible applicant you can be. And taking at least one gap year is becoming the trend in medical school admissions. And so this is something that we definitely encourage our students, although every year we work with students who apply at the end of junior year, get into fantastic medical schools and don't take a gap year. So there's no real formula in terms of, how this works. It really depends on the individual. I'm in the quarter system, so I want my spring quarter grades to be applied into my GPA. Should I wait to submit transcripts to raise my GPA or just send them in now with a lower GPA? So Susmitha, this is a tricky question because it would depend on what your GPA is now. Is your GPA far below the 3.5 threshold, and what is your GPA going to be brought up to with those new grades, and when are those transcripts going to be available? So you need to kind of weigh like, well, what's the benefit of how much higher is my GPA going to be with those grades, and how much is that going to delay my application? So you kind of have to weigh the pros and the cons on both of those things. Besides research, shadowing, networking, and STEP, anything else I should be doing to match competitively? You have named everything, Danielle. So research, shadowing, not so much to be competitive, but shadowing so you take the time to explore all those specialties that you're contemplating. And then networking, yes, relationship building, going to grand rounds, making sure that the people in whatever department you are ultimately going to be applying towards that they know you, right? That so that they can write you strong letters of recommendation. So they're like, oh yeah, Daniel's been coming to our grand round since he was a second year medical student, that kind of thing. So certainly, especially with step scores now, step one now becoming pass fail, that relationship building and letters of recommendation, those are going to now become even more important. The other thing that you want to think about, Daniel, although it's a little bit early, but away rotations, and especially for very competitive specialties, away rotations, electives have always been important. But now with, because we're not going to have that step one benchmark anymore, it's going to become even more important. So that's something else that you kind of want to be thinking about. Maybe not immediately, but it comes up very, very quickly when you have to start thinking about that. Can I submit my MCAS with one score and not indicate that I am going to retake, but then decide to retake? Would medical schools receive the second score like an update? If you have signed up for the MCAT, the way the MCAT score reporting is done is that the schools will know that. So I honestly don't know if you submitted before you signed up for a retake, if they would receive an updated report if you had a future MCAT intent date. And that's something that I would actually call the AMC and ask them that specifically, Najin. And if you could actually email us and let us know what the answer to that is, I would love to know the answer to that. The issue is, again, if you're submitting your application with a lower MCAT and you're retaking the MCAT with hopes of bumping that score and becoming a more competitive applicant. So, you don't, and it's rare that a medical school, when they get a new MCAT score, that they're going to go back and reevaluate your application, right? So you kind of don't want to sort of be automatically, or you don't want to be kind of put in the rejection or the waitlist pile before that second, hopefully higher score comes in, because medical schools won't go back and reconsider in most cases. So that's, you really need to, again, weigh the pluses and minuses of both strategies. So if I were to take my MCAT fall 2022, would I still be able to apply for the 2023 class? Taking the MCAT last year was the only exception to this because of COVID. But if you take a fall MCAT, we would recommend that you wait to apply until the following spring. So if you were to take an MCAT in the fall of 2022, our recommendation would be not to submit an application until the spring of 2023, right? So no. So if you were to take your MCAT in the fall of 2022, you'd be applying for the class of 2024. I realize, it's, if a year is a lot of time, but again, you also have to think about the fact that most students, not all students, but most students are stronger applicants when they've taken gap years. These are all things that sort of need to be considered. Is there a threshold for science GPA? Again, these are kind of not official thresholds. The sort of ballpark numbers are 3.5 for both an overall and a cumulative and a BCPM GPA. Numbers are definitely going up. They go up every year, by a tad. Who knows if they're going to continue to go up. So those are kind of ballpark thresholds. Your trend is important. So let's say you have a 3.5 GPA, but by the end of college, you had a 3.8, and you started off very low. Many students have this trend. So trends are super important. Sometimes it takes students, quite a while, the entire freshman year, to adjust to college life, being away from home, managing your time, all of those kinds of things, managing your social life together with your studies. So, early poor performances academically are typically forgiven. And so trends are really, really important. So, again, when we evaluate an applicant, we look at all of these data points and, we make recommendations, but, just sort of, kind of the general recommendations for sort of the general population as a whole becomes, you know, a 3.5. On the MCAT, it is like a 5.10. We are now really trying to advise our students that, you know, a 5.11, 5.12 is actually, you know, kind of what we're advising now for students to have to be competitive. You know, so everything, you know, tends to shift up just by a notch. Okay, so from what I understand, volunteering and pursuing outside interests are not looked upon as favorably for residency compared to med school. This is correct, Daniel. It's very difficult to get out of that pre-med mindset, you know? So as a pre-med, you know, you're volunteering and you're teaching and you're, you know, you're trying to sort of, you know, pursue things in, you know, kind of all of these different buckets, so to speak. For med school, they want to see you're involved, right? They want to know that you're just not sitting in the library 24/7 and studying, but it really becomes a commitment to that specialty. You know, is it great to work in a free clinic, you know, to show that you're involved in the community through health fairs, you know, through some kind of community service? Absolutely. You definitely want to sort of be involved in some capacity, but it's not as if you have to collect hours and you need to sort of worry about, you know, sort of showing all these different sides of yourself. When you're applying for residency, you're really applying, it's like a job application, right? So you're applying for to now become whatever specialist it is that you want to become. So they want to see that you're more focused in that area. And this continues, right? So, you know, when you're applying for residency, they want to see you're focused on the specialty. And then when you're applying for fellowship, they want to see you're super focused on in the fellowship. And when you're applying for, you know, to be an attending, they want to understand, well, what is your niche going to be? That is if you're applying for academic medicine, you know, so it does sort of change a bit, and it becomes much more focused as you progress along in your medical education and your medical career. Okay, the second score is going to be in by the end of August, early September. Is that too late for an MCAT update? That's a little late. I mean, we would be putting you in the late application bucket if your MCAT's coming back in August, September. So when students are telling us that they're going to be taking, let's say, you know, an August MCAT or, you know, a late July MCAT, we are advising them, you know, to potentially wait until the next year. So, you know, I realize these are tough things to kind of think about when you're trying to decide if you should be applying or not. And of course, there are other factors that determine your competitiveness with regards to your experiences, your letters of recommendation, your background. You know, are you first generation? Are you from an underserved background? Are you from an underrepresented minority? All of these things are going to impact your competitiveness. It's more competitive, obviously, for majority groups, right? And this is the case for all admissions processes, you know, whether that's college, med school, business school, you know, I don't really know business school, but, you know, this is definitely, you know, the case for most admissions processes that I know anything about. Majority groups, it's tougher. So, you know, when advising students, we kind of look at all these different components. So we would want to know a little bit more about your background, about your experiences, to be able to really advise you completely on that. So anyway, so I am so happy that all of you tuned in today. I encourage you, yeah, I have one MCAT, not a horrible one, but I'm trying to improve it. I totally get it. I get it. Yeah. I mean, you could also, sometimes what students also do is they apply with that MCAT this year, and they say, look, I know it's a little on the low side, and I realize I might have to reapply. And they kind of, you know, go into the cycle with open eyes, realizing that chances are slim. I guess it also depends on your state residency. You know, if you're from a state where the average MCATs are very low for your state medical schools, you might have a great chance at getting in, right? So, you know, you really have to, you know, sort of consider all these various factors when deciding, you know, what MCAT to submit. So just think about all of those things. You know, if you're from a certain state and the average MCAT for that state is, you know, a 507, it does exist in some states, you know, and you've got a 509, there you go, you're fine. so you have to look at that data as well. So it has been great to see everyone tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please tune in next week as well, and visit our website at www.mededits.com. We do have some free downloads, which you can download from our website. And please tell your friends about our YouTube channel, about these office hours, and try to get on our email list so you can stay up to date on all the happenings over here. So I hope everybody has a great night. Thank you for tuning in, and good